Hey guys, Dr. Morse, injury experts. So we have a new clean update for Jayden Reed. Finally, some clarity for the Green Bay Packers wide receiver. Now, Reed predominantly runs in the slot and has not been running in two wide receiver sets. That was Matthew Gowan and Romeo Doubs. So he's pretty much relegated to when they have three guys on the field. Tucker Kraft made a massive step forward last year. And unfortunately, they had to put Marshawn Lloyd on the IR again for the second year in a row, secondary to another hamstring strain. So Josh Jacobs is probably going to get a lot of volume. Now, Jordan Love, coming off of a left UCL tear, which is this ligament right here, likely had to have it reconstructed, which usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks. But he will be much good to go by week 1. Maybe by 2 or 3, he'll be 100%. Thankfully, that's the non-throwing thumb, which obviously changes things a little bit. Dontavian Wicks returned to practice yesterday with a calf strain. He has to be a little bit careful with the re-injury, but same thing. Christian Watson looks pretty good with his ACL reconstruction, but probably going to miss a good 8 to 10 weeks, depending on how he's doing. So we have to really focus on how healthy is Reed, the potential breakout of first-round wide receiver, rare for the Green Bay Packers to do, in specifically Matthew Golden, and then obviously how much of a factor and why is he being slept on so much, Romeo Doubs. So let's get back to Reed's injury, which is actually much bigger than I thought. So we had heard he was in a boot on his left foot and taking some time off, basically late July, early August. We haven't really heard much of an update since. He was trying to return to the practice field the other day, but it didn't really go very well. Now we finally get some clarity, and you see this tweet right here. And then when you click on the article, here is the deep dive of the actual info. So initially what I thought it was going to be a midfoot sprain. So if we look at the foot, the midfoot is this aspect right here, just above the big toe. And this is classically what sprains. This is what Najee Harris had early last year. Grade 2 is what Joe Mixon had several years ago that cost him most of the season, and probably what he's dealing with again. And then a grade 3 would have been what Travis Etienne had, that had to have season-ending surgery. But he was trying to power through, so I'm like, it's probably a grade 1. He's being smart, but usually they only take about 2 weeks off. And it's been longer than 2 weeks, so what are we missing here? Finally, we get clarity. It wasn't a midfoot sprain. It was a Jones fracture. Okay, what does that mean? So a Jones fracture is the pinky toe, but not towards the toe, towards the base. Now, there's 3 sections of this bone that are very important. There's the avulsionar zone 1, close to the heel. That is where the tendon attaches. That has a good blood supply, not overly concerning. Then there's zone 2, which is the Jones fracture, which we'll talk about in a sec. Then there's zone 3, which is basically from here all the way towards the end of the toe. Those are not very common, usually spiral fractures and funky stuff like that. Jones fractures are unfortunately semi-common in athletes, especially NFL players, because of the way that they run and because of the ankle instability. So what can happen is when you're running, the big toe can roll underneath the foot slightly as you step down, causing the weakest part of the bone to fracture. Now, the problem with this area, this is known as a watershed area. Similar to the part of the Achilles that tears, there is a very poor blood supply in this area. So you have a blood supply coming up to the tip, and then you have another blood supply from here down. But there's a gap of about 1 inch or so that does not get blood flow. So when you crack it or fracture through that, it doesn't heal. And that's the problem with this situation. He's trying to power through, but this is never going to heal if it's a true Jones fracture without a screw or a plate, just depending on how the surgeon wants to do it. Now, let me give you a couple examples of who suffered this and how long they missed and how they're going to do. This is what Julio Jones had twice. This is what Derrick Henry had a couple years ago in his monster season that caused him to basically miss the second half of the season. This is also the same injury that Greg Olsen had. Unfortunately, it required surgery and then eventually refractured through the same screw and reportedly ended his career as a result. We saw this Deebo Samuel about 3 or 4 years ago, and he missed most of the first half of camp and a little, I believe, a couple games, and then he was fine. What is the timeline for a Jones fracture? The data shows you cannot come back before 11 weeks. That's the number. Not 10, not 8. You cannot do it before 11 weeks. Why? The range of refracture and of re-injury dramatically drops at the 11-week mark. That's how long it takes for that bone to finally get healed through that ligament, through that screw or plate or whatever they're inserting. So what Reed basically was told is, hey, if you have surgery on this, you're at least missing the first half of the season, if not longer. What he should have did was had immediate surgery, placed on IR/PUP, whatever you want to call it, and then he probably would have came back in week 8 or so. Now he's trying to power through it, but he's not going to have the aggressiveness, he's not going to have the lateral mobility and the explosiveness to run his routes cleanly. And as a result, I think this is going to linger the entire season, and this is going to essentially derail his season. This is not what the Packers wanted. They need him. He's actually very good when he's running his slot routes. But this injury, there's not, I specialize in stem cells. There's no stem cells that can help this. This is a blood flow structural issue. You have to put a screw or a plate in this. This is the same issue that caused that Raiders lineman to basically be dropped because he didn't want to have surgery, and they did. So they basically said, hey, you're gone. If he doesn't have surgery, he's never going to look like himself. And there is still high risk to have surgery and it not working out as well as you would like. He'll be better. He just may not be 100%. Eventually, some guys even have the screw removed once it's healed. But this is something that's going to plague him all of 2025 if the diagnosis is correct. Until he has surgery. Maybe he can have surgery and he will miss the first 10 to 12 weeks, and then he'll be available for the second half of the season. Unfortunate news, but he is immediately on the do not draft list, and this bumps up Dubes and Tucker Kraft as well as Matthew Golden even higher. We will see what they're going to do with the slot because he was the primary slot guy. That's what I have for you. I'm Dr. Jesse Morse from the Injury Experts here at the Osteopathic Center in Miami. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'd love to have them. If you have any, if you want help with your injuries analysis, check out the injuryexperts.com.